You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Today we're going to talk about your brand, what you need to do with your brand, how you might need to redefine the brand, and the most important thing is that a brand is more than a logo and a name. It's really building a DNA profile from the inside out, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Convenience Matters. My name is Jeff Lenard with NACS.
And my name is Donovan Woods, also with NACS and the Fuels Institute.
And today we are live at the NACS show, and we are talking brand strategy with Mike Loshi, president of Paragon Solutions. Welcome, Mike.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being invited.
So, brand strategy. I think most people say we need a new logo. We need a new image. We need something like that. And that's reactive. That's kind of a Band-Aid or whatever the right analogy is. Or what really it is brand strategy? Where does it start?
It's a great question, and if we had 2 hours, we could probably get to the answer. But I think initially what the problem is that people have a very limited understanding of what brand is. And brand is really every way that you communicate as a company. It's your culture. It's certainly the logo and certainly the name. But that's like the starting point. That's the opening ante into brand strategy. It's what builds around that and how you communicate that. When you start with, let's say, a virgin brand, a brand that is a brand new name or a brand new logo, it really means nothing. It doesn't come into reality until you establish what that means or what that stands for. You create a brand promise, and that promise is, okay, the Mike Loshi brand is going to promise that we are going to do these things, and then deliver. And then it starts having that recognition and that association with the brand.
So there has to be a story with it. I guess the question is, what you kind of answered then, what comes first, the logo or how I feel when I see the logo? I like a certain golden arches every once in a while, so if I drive by, it tells me a story without it having to say anything based on how I felt for years of going. But what if the logo is great and the story's awful? Does that still work?
Absolutely not.
See?
And it works both ways. Sometimes you go in and you do an assessment on a company and you say, you've got a really cool culture.
Right.
Your people are awesome. But man, the way you look doesn't reflect who you are. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it's a matter of marrying those two and understanding that the two have to be, cohesive and they have to work together, or it doesn't work. So it goes both ways.
And when you talk about defining a brand, I assume you interview employees, you interview CEOs, where do the customers fit in? Because are there ever instances where it's kind of inside baseball, where it's like, oh yeah, you guys have a great culture and you're all about this and you have, foosball tables and things like that. But if the customer doesn't connect with what you created, then there's a disconnect.
Oh, absolutely. And the customer is not an afterthought. The customer has got to be on the forefront. And by that I mean, we all have rose-colored glasses and we all think we're better looking than we are. And I mean that personally. I think I'm a lot better looking than I really am. So I'm
on podcast for a reason, so I don't agree with you on that.
Well, all right. So the point is you need dispassionate third-party observations and an understanding of who you are. And with that, then you can have a reality check, if you will, and you can really look at, okay, this is where I am today, but that's not where I want to be. So then you start at that point and you say, okay, this is where I want to be. Now, how do you get from A to B? And I think that's building the brand. And a logo's not going to fix it. A name's not going to fix it. A culture will fix it. And extending that culture throughout your operations from the first new hire, to the guy that founded the company. That's got to be cohesive from top to bottom. And that's what you should be communicating. So it's really brand is a reflective presentation of who you are. And that's what they see, what they smell, what they touch, what they feel when they come onto your site. And it starts from the time that they roll onto your site until the time that they leave. So what are they seeing? What are they feeling? And sometimes you have to take that half step back and look at it dispassionately and say, am I really as clean as I think I am? Am I really as friendly as I think I am? Is the food really that good? Nothing drives me crazier than when I'm out in the field and talking to customers and, well, where do you want to go to eat? When some of them will say, well, I certainly don't want to go to my place. Like, well, why wouldn't you? You know, it should be great. It should be your favorite food. It should be reflective of who you are. Oh, no, it's terrible. And so there's that.
You have a fork in the logo.
Yeah, it's a crooked fork. It doesn't really work out. So brand is really everything that communicates. And as your company grows and as you evolve, your brand has to evolve too. And that's visually and every other way it should evolve. So brand is a living, breathing thing to me. And creating a brand is not a one and done thing. It's a journey. And it's a fun journey if you treat it that way.
There was a article in a recent Forbes article that talked about brand strategy. And it says, one thing I really liked, it says it requires the company to deliver a thoughtful approach to design combined with the comprehensive customer experience strategy. And I think that makes sense because there are places that I like, and it is what you said, how I feel. But not only how I feel when I walk in, it's what I know is going to happen every single time I go. For the most part, It's going to be quick, it's going to be efficient. They're going to say hello. I'm going to feel as if I'm a part of the company, not just a customer. But that seems to be very, very, very hard to do. And let's say, for example, with a C-store, customers are only there typically 5 minutes max.
Right.
If they're getting gas and then they go inside even a little bit shorter than that if they're just getting gas. How do you make that kind of connection that quick? What can you do?
Well, there's so many things that you can do, and it doesn't have to be this big, huge, presentation. Sometimes it is the little things. The smile. I was talking to a customer this morning, Freshies out of Maine, and he talked about how he does brand promise training. Now, here's a new revelation to me because I've never really seen anyone else do it to the extent that he does. So for new hires and for existing hires, they spend a full half day to a day, and they actually go through. So, for example, when you greet a customer, what do you say? We'll say, hi, how are you? Okay, but if you got a frown on your face, it sounds like a frown, right? So now change it up. Hi, how are you? It's different. So he goes through and he's very organic about it, and he teaches the brand promise. So from a corporate standpoint, this is who they are. This is what they promise. It's fast, it's fresh, it's friendly.
Right.
It's his brand promise. So what does that mean? So you got to disseminate it beyond that because that's too generic, right? So he gets into, well, the friendly part. Let's dive in. That friendly means you better have a smile on your face when you say, "Hi, how are you?" And it works. It works. So sometimes the little things mean more. So for that customer coming in that 3 minutes, that 4 minutes, for them, the brand that they see is the brand that they feel. So if they feel that they're appreciated, if they feel that person is genuine, then that brand is genuine. That brand connects.
Right.
So every touch point, every connection that you make is part of that brand promise. And you've got to deliver consistently on that brand promise. So you're right, it's not easy.
No. Yeah,
but it's got to be ingrained. It's got to be part of your culture.
Right.
And at NACS, we have two examples of branding. I'll throw one out new and one out in taking a brand. And when we created Convenience Matters 3-4 years ago, we spent an awful lot of time thinking about what is that brand? What is that name? What is the audience? What is the proper length? Mm-hmm. By the way, the right length is about 20-25 minutes, length of a commute, length of a typical jog, length of typical time you may walk your dog or something like that. Lot of time spent on that with a new brand. Now at NACS, we also revitalized our brand. We changed our logo, but it was more, originally it was like, let's look at a new logo. And then it went so much further. It went to the brand promise. It went to what is our bullseye target and things like that. And then Donovan, of course, with the Fuels Institute and creating that a couple of years ago. So those are a couple of examples that are close to us. Now, on the retail level, when should you look at a brand? Do you look at it like the Fuels Institute or Convenience Matters when it's being created? Do you look at it 50-some years into the brand like we did with the NACS logo? And then when and why would you look at a logo? So that's a lot to unpack. Pick the ones you like and take it away.
The easy answer is you should look at it every day, but that I know that's kind of cheating. But I'm half serious when I say that because brand is a living, breathing thing. And so what happens, especially with our legacy companies, is we get very comfortable with who we are. And so we really don't change some of the visual aspects, and we really don't change some of the physical aspects very much. But, our culture continues to evolve. More importantly, our customers continue to evolve. the needs and wants and desires of our customers as, they roll over into the millennials, into the Gen Z, Gen X, pick a gen. So our customers are changing. Well, if we're not changing with them, and if our brand isn't changing with them, we are disconnecting and losing that connection that the brand is supposed to give you. The brand is supposed to give you a way to connect emotionally with your customer. So as your customers evolve, your brand should evolve. And again, it doesn't have to be big, huge things. Sometimes it's a little thing. Sometimes it's a new initiative. But tweaking the brand and continuing to evolve and bringing that third party in, as you did with NACS. I'm sure you didn't do it all internally.
Oh, I did. I did.
Yeah. Take all the credit. Well, Jeff is awesome.
I Googled and put together a couple emojis.
Google's
and it worked.
great.
That's how you should do all design. You just Google it and you Frankenstein it all together, and then you have something special.
It's a multi-year process, and it did not involve me.
Yeah. Well, and it should involve, as one of you said earlier, it should involve everyone from the customers to the highest ranked to the lowest ranked and everywhere in between, because it's all part of the brand. I mean, they all have a say. They all have a piece of that brand.
So it seems like, and I'm cutting you off because there's a piece you just said there. And Jeff, we're going to go back to your questions about the 12 questions you had for Mike to answer. But
Didn't I answer them all?
Almost.
Okay,
To do all of that, that means it would have to affect every single part of your business. And I specifically meaning human resources.
Yes.
You'd have to hire people that either fit your brand or that are at least moldable or agreeable to be a part of that. That just seems like a lot of effort. This isn't something you do once. We hire a company, they come in, they change everything, and then it's over.
Yeah, you hear about companies like Southwest Airlines and the way they hire, and they always talk about you can train the task, but you can't train the attitude, so you hire the people that best mirror your brand. And what I also found today in talking to Robert Tracy at Freshies, he talked about how the people want to be a part of this brand, and just organically by building this brand that he's proud of and they're proud of, the level of people and the quality of the people that come to him and say, I want to work for you. I want to be in that store. I want to be a part of this mission. For one thing, the mission's clear. And when you talk about the millennial generation, when you talk about, they want to know what their mission is. They want to know what's expected, and they want to be a part of that team. These are the key things that you hear again and again. So if you build a brand that they want to be a part of, that's a big deal. And I think some of that actually organically will fix itself by getting better people.
Right. That makes sense. Go ahead, please.
Is there a short version, like for those who are fearful of the cost, the commitment, etc., to revitalize a brand? Is there kind of this will take you another couple of years, but is there like the oil change version as opposed to buying a new car?
Well, you get what you pay for. And I'm not talking about money. I'm really talking about investment in time and investment in corporate energy and corporate culture. The more that you invest in your brand and who you are, the better the returns on investment. And now I am talking about money, because you will get a return on investment if your brand, works. If you're communicating with your customers at that level, then it will work. It's when you mail it in and when you do the short version where, let's say, I don't want to pick on anyone, but let's say you pick a major oil company and you put their brand on the canopy and it's perfect and it's everything that they want it to be. Then you bring it to your retail store and now you're a blank mart. Well, now you don't have a brand. Now you're generic. Now you've mailed it in. But once you transition to, the Donovan mart and you create the Donovan brand, now you've got something. And that's really the key. But it's not going to happen overnight. Building a brand doesn't happen quickly. It takes time.
It takes time, and I'm assuming, again, money, and it takes buy-in from everyone on the staff. But one of the other things that the Forbes article mentioned, I would love to hear your opinion about this. It talked about that some customers, probably younger, expect with their best brands to be able to shop at low or no cost. I think that's kind of ridiculous, but because as you said, you're going to get what you pay for or not pay for. But what role does price or how a customer comes in and sees your pricing, whether inside or outside of the store, what role does that play in how they feel about a person's brand or a company's brand?
If more than price, I think it's value. And so if your brand is offering a perceived value, now if you have that one hot dog that's on the roller grill and has been for 2 hours waiting to sell it to the last one, and you give it to them for a nickel, what's it worth?
Right.
But if you've got a fresh sandwich that you make in front of them and you charge them $6 for it, what's that worth? So, I think value is the proposition. Value builds brand. And when those align, then I think you're better off. So I think as an industry, we get too caught up in price. We get too caught up in the nickels and dimes, and we don't focus on the needs and the wants.
Yeah, and the other element is everybody wants to be cool, everybody wants to be current, but in design, is there such a thing as being, maybe I'm making up a word, overcurrent? And what I mean by that is, like, if you see something that, let's just say it's teal, I'm saying, oh, wow, you were founded in the year 2000. It may have been cool then, and it still may be cool now, but you can kind of feel like this was a moment in time.
Oh, absolutely.
And how can you feel current without also starting that path towards dated?
Well, I think current is a good word. I think relevant is a better word. And it should tie back to the demographics that you're trying to pursue. So in understanding your brand promise, who are you making that promise to? Who is your customer? If it's an urban store in New York, it's going to be entirely different than a country store in Lubbock, Texas. So understand who you are, where you are, offer the brand promises to your customers that are relevant, and then you're going to be fine. And what happens when you do that is the unimportant things like color and they fall into place.
So I'll follow up with it something. We do a lot of consumer surveys. We do a lot of things. And how do you do media training? And how do you tell stories? We look at consumer perceptions for both positives and for negatives. Mm-hmm. When you look at a brand promise, do you also look at the negatives? I don't think you ever want to say your tagline would be, we're not gougers or something like that. But do you look at what might be things that you totally want to stay away from because it's not part of the brand promise? How do you mitigate negatives, for instance?
Yeah, there's nothing worse than a broken brand promise, because now you're a fake, you're a phony, and do they really trust you? Do they trust you with their next, journey into your store, or are you losing it entirely? And that I think that's really important to differentiate.
So you're here, you're looking at the NACS show logo everywhere. Mm-hmm. How does, from a brand, don't tell us we're doing it anything less than awesome, but how do you, when you see a thing like the NACS show logo and how it's portrayed throughout the whole hall everywhere, how do you see us like, oh, I get it, they're doing it this way, they're doing it that way, this means this? Are there kind of things you look at differently when you look at brands and logos than most of us look at them? Because some of us look at them as just purely directional.
Yeah. I don't know if I look at it differently. Maybe I'm a little more observant to color distinctions and how they're used. For example, one of the things I noticed is the way you've incorporated the green, but it also tags to some of your mission statements and some of the things that you're doing. And so it's a way of delineating certain things and creating a level of importance. And I know that was intentional in the way you did it. Now,
owning the C.
Yeah, owning the C, yeah.
And it's customer, it's convenience, it's quick, it's choice. It's a good
Quick's
word.
Q, by the way.
Or a K.
Ooh, yes.
Yes.
But it's not C.
Well, we'll
Nope.
fix it in post. We'll fix it in post. Don't worry about that. So, and also Paragon. Yeah. You deliberately set out with your name and looking at how do you tell your stories. Was it weird to kind of go through thinking, is it easier or harder when you understand brand to come up with your own brand and tell that brand story?
It's torture. We are our own worst customer because we went through a rebranding 5 years ago, and we used that same green almost. It is a relevant color, but it wasn't about just the green. It was, in a sense, paying homage to our legacy. We've been around 33 years, so I didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But, now we've got all these millennial designers who are awesome and they're incredibly talented, and they all had their own opinions. They all wanted to put their mark on it. So all of a sudden we have these shapes and forms and different things. And I'm like, whoa, time out. So old guy had to weigh in a little bit and, put my foot down. but they certainly influenced me and dragged me kicking and screaming to a new brand. And I'm very proud of that brand. I'm very proud of how we're communicating and what we're doing. And we're very education-based in the way we pursue design branding. We want to teach.
Happens.
We're
It happens.
gonna
It was
fix
such
that.
a good ending to that. But I guess if you were to wrap up anything, what would be one piece you could give to any retailer, whether they own one store or they do have 100 stores? What should they do tomorrow that they can actually accomplish?
I think the first thing that I would do, people are in such a rush to do. I think the first thing you have to do is take that step back and assess. And it shouldn't be you assessing, it should be someone else assessing, even if it's, someone in a different industry. Just ask them to come through your store and assess that emotional connection or lack of emotional connection. So what do you see? What do you feel? What's happening? And, jot it down and be honest. Just be honest. So now you've got something to work with. So now you can prioritize and now you can do. But people that do before they think, it never ends well.
No, and anywhere in life that does not work well at all.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's a good tip, and I think we can take that with us. What do you think, Jeff?
I think it's a great ending tip, and thank you, Mike, for joining us today.
Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Pay attention to that brand, and thank you for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.